Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I did want to mention that we are running a sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium, so make sure you check that out. You can lock in that lower rate as long as you do not cancel your subscription. We, of course, do have a website with thousands of charts. Not only do we have crypto charts, we have charts for equities and the macroverse as well. We've been using the last 18 months to really build that out. So make sure you check it out. Link is in the description below, and we'll run that sale just for probably a couple of weeks or so. Let's go ahead and jump in. So we talked a lot about this, about Bitcoin falling back down to its 20-week SMA, right? Fading the rally from April. And right now, we find ourselves with Bitcoin down about 5.5% on the week. Now, if you remember, one of the things we've discussed this year is that oftentimes in the pre-halving year, we see about half up, half down, right? That's what we historically see. And also, we spoke at length about how during the pre-halving year, we get both the bears and the bulls wrecked. And once everyone is sufficiently wrecked, then sometime during the halving year, we actually generally see a much more sustained increase in the price. Be that as it may, right now we are still sort of knee deep within the pre-halving year. And so my general expectation is that the move will ultimately get faded in the second half of the year. We have talked at length about various outcomes supported by the data, one of which is Bitcoin falling back to the bull market support band. And one of the reasons that I have not been as optimistic on crypto in the pre-halving year is one of the things that we've watched closely is the altcoin market, right? And the reason why we've watched it is because we want to better understand why is Bitcoin going up. Is it going up because of some fundamental bullishness, or is it going up because the altcoin market is bleeding back to the blue chips? Right? There's a distinct difference there, and that's what we need to remind ourselves of. If you remember, there's really two clear times where you should compare, in my opinion, the current test of the 20-week moving average, right? You can look towards 2019 and you can look towards 2020. And in both cases, you will find evidence to support either view. However, the thing that I keep coming back to is if the market is so bullish, why is total 3 showing extreme weakness? Okay, now think about this for a minute, right? In 2020, when we were holding the line, when Bitcoin USD was holding the line, so too was total 3. It was holding the line as well, showing you that there was a lot of liquidity coming into the market. There were a lot of new market participants coming in because the altcoin market was holding the line. But we know the altcoin market has not been holding the line and fell below the 20-week SMA a month ago, right? A full month ago at this point. And you can see that despite everything that happened with Bitcoin, total 3 hasn't even gotten back above its own bull market support band. So you could better off think of it as a bear market resistance band. One of the things we've talked about is that if Bitcoin were to get some, and we mentioned this a few weeks ago, we said that if Bitcoin falls back in and then gets this bounce back up, it could be a temporary bounce by Bitcoin USD back up to the upside. But because total 3 is already below its bull market support band, it might not even be sufficient to get the altcoin market back above its bull market support band. It could just be a retest of the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA and a potential rejection from it, right? Now, so far, that's what we've seen. In reality, at this point, total 3 didn't even make it to the bull market support band. But be that as it may, we did at least get a small bounce here. And note that this bounce that failed even to get back to the 21-week EMA occurred when Bitcoin bounced off of its own bull market support band, or mostly, it almost made it there. Bitcoin moved up about 10% during that time. Total 3 couldn't even be bothered to get back above its bull market support band during that same period of time. And so you really have to ask yourself, right? If there's so much liquidity pouring into crypto, why is the altcoin market so weak, right? Why is the altcoin market so weak? And I will remind you, in 2019, so if we go take a close look at 2019, total 3 fell below the 20-week SMA the week of July 8th. July 8th? Wow. Why is that important? Well, you might say, well, does that mean we have another month? No, I mean, the altcoin market's already below it. But the reason it's important, as I want to remind you, is that total 3 fell below the 20-week SMA back on July 8th of 2019, sort of sending out a warning signal to Bitcoin. Now, it's not like it had to play out like this, but remember, Bitcoin USD did not fall below its 20-week SMA on July 8th like the altcoin market did. In fact, on July 8th, Bitcoin was still near its prior high. It wasn't until late September that Bitcoin saw the capitulation candle below its bull market support band, sort of confirming that we were in fact in a renewed downtrend, and that downtrend was likely going to last for some time. We ended up fading it for basically the rest of the year. We rallied into the recession, and then we came down. Okay. Now, anytime I mention this, a lot of people sort of don't like the fact that I gloss over everything that happened with the pandemic as if it's not, as if it's just something to sort of just gloss over and not talk about how it was a black swan. At the end of the day, we had an inverted yield curve in 2019. Okay. It did not predict the pandemic, right? We're not suggesting that an inverted yield curve predicted the pandemic. That would be silly, right? It would be silly to assume that. But if you go look at, again, if you look at treasury yield spread, so we're just looking at the 3-month and the 10-year yield, the spread on the 3-month and the 10-year yield, we had an inverted yield curve, and normally it means a recession comes upon the uninversion. That's what it normally means. Now, it doesn't tell you what event is going to cause it, because, a lot of times, look, the narrative does not drive the price. The price drives the narrative, okay? So, in this case, an inverted yield curve, it's not going to tell you the exact reason that the market is going to go down. But what it does suggest is that upon the uninversion, the economy is going to be in a relatively fragile state. And it only takes one more thing to really tip it over the edge. And yes, in 2020, it happened to be the pandemic. I'm not suggesting that the inverted yield curve predicted the pandemic. What I am suggesting is that the inverted yield curve predicted that the economy was sick and it only took one more thing to send it over the edge. Okay? So, again, that's basically what happened, right? We faded the second half of the year, we rallied into the recession, and then we actually got the recession. It was a very quick recession. Imagine what would have happened had the Fed not printed $6 trillion. We'll never know. And even in the next recession, they'll probably print at some point. They might not print as quickly as they did this time. Also, there might not be a capitulation as quickly as there was this time. Remember, last time that we saw this capitulation by Bitcoin, it was on the back of the unemployment rate skyrocketing to basically 10% or more almost overnight, right? More than 10%, 14, 15% almost overnight. So if instead the unemployment rate just sort of slowly goes up, then it might be a more, slow systematic bleed based on the rate at which the unemployment rate is going up, rather than some type of major capitulation crash, right? Like we could see something like that play out. And it could be a lot of people sort of really wanting the Fed to pivot and get us back to QE, but they might be somewhat resistant to do that. In the short term, Bitcoin is now below the bull market support band. Now, is this relevant? Not really, not yet, because the week is still pretty young. It's only Monday. Who knows where it's going to be by Sunday night? We could be back. We could be back above it, and the wick be nothing more than a wick. But it is at least sending off a warning sign. Total 3 sent off the warning sign back in a month ago. Because and by the way, we keep seeing this. I pointed out on Twitter, right, all this alt season stuff trending and whatnot, and I kept saying, well, if you're expecting an alt season, who are you expecting to buy your bags, right? You always have to think about, well, if there's all these meme coins are pumping and views across crypto YouTube are going down and followers to crypto Twitter analysts are fading and followers to exchanges on Twitter are fading, at least the rate of new ones. If all of that is fading, then you have to ask yourself, who is going to be there to buy your bags, right? And we talked about this on the last one as well. Like if you look at the social risk, right? The social risk I think is relevant to talk about, and it's been slowly decreasing for a long time. Remember, in 2020, when Bitcoin held the line, what was going on with the social risk? It was slightly going down once price pulled back, but it was still trending higher, right? It was putting in a series of higher lows, meaning people were coming into the cryptoverse. Okay, there continued to be a net improvement in social interest, really since the end of 2018. Higher lows. What are we witnessing this time so far? We're seeing lower lows. We have not yet seen a sustained trend reversal on the social risk. To me, this continues to suggest that there are still some people who are likely going to capitulate, at least on their altcoin positions. They might go back to USD, they might go back to Bitcoin. I don't know, right? I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they throw them into some meme coins and get wrecked that way. But the point is that until this really bottoms out, there still is this idea that the altcoin market, the altcoin reckoning does continue. Okay, because look, the other way to look at this too is Bitcoin, where it stands right now, is currently 23. It would need to drop another 23% just to get back to its March low. Total 3, the altcoin market, it's already almost there. It would only need to drop about 3 or 4%, and it's already back to its March low. So again, to me, what this continues to suggest is that the liquidity that a lot of people are kind of expecting to lead them to an alt season is not yet justified. It's just not. And that's captured by the fact that the social risk continues to go down. And it's also captured by the fact that you still have had Bitcoin closing above the 20-week SMA. I get it. I know it's below it right now, and we could get a weekly close below it, and we could fade 2019 we could fade 2023 just like we faded 2019. That's a distinct possibility. But even though we don't yet have a weekly close on Bitcoin, we've had several on Total 3, not one of which over the last month has shown any strength whatsoever. It's just been a slow, systematic bleed back down in the same way that it did in 2019, right? It was just a slow, systematic bleed. By the way, by the time that Bitcoin actually fell below its 20-week SMA back in 2019, remember, it was in September, in late September, in fact. By this point, Total 3 had been below its bull market support band for a couple of months. So again, the whole idea is that the altcoin market in 2019 provided the warning signal weeks before Bitcoin USD fell below its own 20-week SMA. And I know that we're below the 20-week SMA right now because we're now at 25,619. And by the way, the 20-week SMA is at 26,192. The 21-week EMA is at 25,822. So we are currently below it. We could pop back above it by the end of the week. But let me talk about one of the things I am worried about in terms of the relative health of the cryptocurrency market. Okay. Now, we're going to relate this to the S&P. So we've talked before about how Total 3 gave the warning sign to Bitcoin and said, you know what? Things aren't looking great. Liquidity's drying up. It's no longer going to be able to really support the Bitcoin rally for too much longer. Gave the warning sign in 2019. Bitcoin eventually fell below. Okay, Bitcoin is already below its 20-week SMA. Right now it is. Where the potential issue is the stock market. If you think about what has transpired in equities, it has basically just been up only for weeks. Take a look at the NASDAQ. It has been essentially up only for weeks. At some point, there will likely be a mean reversion trade, meaning that everyone who comes in and YOLOs in at a new local high gets wrecked, right? That's what the market does. It goes up a lot over a certain period of time. Everyone YOLOs in, they get wrecked. Then it goes down for a while. Everyone sells at the bottom, then they get wrecked, right? At some point, I would imagine over the coming weeks, we will see a mean reversion trade where we see the NASDAQ come back down. Now, listen, guys, no one is taking the RSI to the bank. Okay, we know that. No one's taking the RSI to the bank. But I will point out that we are, at least if we go look at, say, like a daily time frame over here, we are getting pretty high up here on the daily RSI. And, normally when it gets this high, we're not too far away from at least a pullback in the not so distant future. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, is when you look at the NASDAQ in 2019, what was going on? What was going on right here? That justified Bitcoin going back up to much higher levels. The NASDAQ was putting in new highs. It's not yet putting in new highs, right? I mean, it hasn't put in new highs. And I mean, it's still maybe trying to close this gap up here that I'm sure that some people would like to see get filled. But the point is that what happened in July? You can see there was a pullback here in May. We put in a new high, but in the summer, the NASDAQ saw a 7 or 8% correction. Furthermore, the S&P 500 in 2019 was also putting in new highs, right? It's not today. It would have to rally a good amount today to get anywhere close to new all-time highs. It's not close to new all-time highs right now. But look what happened to the S&P in July. We got about a 7% move to the downside. Okay, why is that an issue? And then it came back down again. These corrections by the S&P were absorbed, and we went to new highs in late 2019. Bitcoin did not, right? Crypto is further along the risk curve than equities. Equities can climb the wall of worry easier than crypto can. There's a difference between a company that's turning profits, and making billions of dollars, and the most recent altcoin that has a good community, right? There's a big difference between those two. The latter needs QE. It needs ideally low interest rates. It needs a good narrative. Okay, we're really struggling with QE, right? We are in QT. We have higher interest rates, and the narrative right now is that the SEC is going after crypto. So crypto, it takes a lot more to get crypto moving than it does the equity market, and that's why you see it lag. So you might, some people might be sitting here thinking that it's just we're just a few days away from Bitcoin catching up to the NASDAQ, but just remember this. If you overlay the S&P 500 to Bitcoin in 2019, you will see, in fact, that Bitcoin faded while the S&P continued to climb the wall of worry. Okay? It continued to climb the wall of worry. And it wasn't until early 2020, or the halving year, that Bitcoin saw its final capitulation, and then the actual bull market began. Not just this sort of half up, half down nonsense that goes on in the pre-halving year. Okay? So it's not that dissimilar from what we've previously seen. We've seen in the pre-halving year where the S&P climbed the wall of worry and crypto faded. And then it wasn't until after we had the resolution of the yield curve and the recession that everything went up together. So there's a distinct difference here that I think we need to remind ourselves of, is that Bitcoin does not always follow the NASDAQ. Okay? The other thing that I think is important to think about with regards to Bitcoin, in the same way that Bitcoin is now right around its bull market support band and trying to hold out support, remember, Total 3, just to remind you, is already below it. Okay? Total 3 is already below it. So what we talked about was if Bitcoin fades back down and then bounces, it could just be a rejection of Total 3 by the 20-week SMA. Now, let's carry that line of reasoning to the equity market. Okay? If equities, if the S&P, let's go over here to the S&P. If the S&P were to get some type of mean reversion back down, then what happens to Bitcoin if the S&P drops 5%, but Bitcoin's already below its bull market support band? That's basically what happened, right? In 2019. And remember too, the S&P had a correction, an 8% correction when it hit 4,100. It then had a 9% correction when it hit 4,200. We're now basically we just hit around 4,300. So there is this idea of, what if the S&P gets some type of even a 5% correction, or if it's like a 10% correction, and you already have Bitcoin below its 20-week SMA, if and when the S&P gets that mean reversion trade, then that's how you sort of see crypto fade in the second half of the year. Because while the S&P might just be getting some type of mean reversion where it goes back down in the short term, right? Like it could do something like this. It could fade and then rally back up in the second half of the year, climbing the wall of worry until we get either a potential recession. Bitcoin might already have thrown in the towel because it's already back below the 20-week SMA, just like it was in 2019. Just like it was in 2019, right? Remember, the S&P went up, crypto went down for the second half of 2019. Okay? So that is something that I think we need to constantly remind ourselves of, is that Bitcoin does not always follow the NASDAQ. It does not always follow the S&P 500. In fact, historically, what we normally need to see with the NASDAQ is new highs for Bitcoin to really do well. I mean, guys, again, in 2019, when Bitcoin went up 4x, even in the pre-halving year 2019, it still wasn't a new high. The NASDAQ was putting in new highs. The NASDAQ was putting in new highs in late 2019 and 2020. It had this capitulation, but then it still was putting in new highs in mid to late 2020 as well. And Bitcoin did very well. So the NASDAQ is still not at new highs, okay? And I mean, you might say, well, maybe it is going to go to new highs. Hey, maybe you're right. I don't know. What I do know is I look at this chart and I'm expecting some type of mean reversion at some point, all right? I'm not saying that it has to play out as bad as it did over here. I'm not really expecting the NASDAQ to correct 83%. I mean, so far, it's all about a 30-something% correction. But a counterpoint is that, back over here, if you look at where the NASDAQ rallied to back in the dot-com crash, you can see that it basically rallied to right back above the 618. Which I think is more or less where it is right now, maybe slightly above it, just like it was back then. So there is still, I think, some reason, again, right, yeah, just above 618. So I think there is still some reason to be cautious in general, but do note that just like 2019, the equity market can climb the wall of worry even if crypto refuses to do so, right? Even if crypto is stuck in traffic on Struggle Street, equities can still often do well as long as there's not an imminent recession risk. And we are starting to see recession risk come back, at least with the unemployment rate starting to move higher. And I just put out a 68 tweet thread on Twitter going through a lot of the different recession indicators, some of which say we're in a recession, some of which say we're not in a recession, some say a recession's coming, some say it's nowhere close. Look, you're gonna find reasons to believe what you want to believe. You don't really have to look that far. But my sort of thinking is if the altcoin market is so bullish, why are people leaving, right? Here, when Bitcoin held the line, social risk was going up. Here it's going down, okay? That's what's happening right now. And the other thing to consider is when you look at total 3 divided by the market cap of Bitcoin, we talked about this as well, it sort of seems like an oscillator, right? Kind of, you get this ebb and flow from one extreme to the other. Now, I'm sure someone's going to want me to talk about the dominance, and believe me, I like talking about it too. But we also mentioned many times that the dominance after a substantial rally could get some type of long consolidation. Not that dissimilar from what we have seen many, many times. Consolidation after a move higher, consolidation. Guess where all 3 of these ultimately found support? Well, you have the 100-day as one potential stop. That's currently coming in at around 47%. You also have the bull market support band, right, as a potential line for the Bitcoin dominance to defend. So while Bitcoin USD is below its 20-week SMA as we speak, the dominance is not. And I would argue that if we get weekly closes below the 20-week SMA, then you likely would see the altcoin market bleed back to Bitcoin, just like they did in 2019, right? Remember, if you go look at total 3 and you look at, let's go look at, say, the monthly Heikin-Ashi candles. Where did alts get wrecked, right? They got wrecked here, and they also got wrecked again here, and they got wrecked again here. And they kept bleeding against Bitcoin for the most part during that entire phase. Okay, so you could argue that we've sort of completed this one, and now we're in sort of the second phase, right? So this is your sort of your primary bear market, one. This is your fade of the pre-halving year, which is 2, which is arguably what we're in right now. And then maybe the grand finale is the rise of the altcoin market as you rally into a recession, right? And when you see the uninversion of the yield curve, and then that would be 3. And then at that point, then I might get interested in the altcoin market if that opportunity presents itself. If it doesn't present itself, then hey, I'm a fixed income investor instead of an altcoin investor. But that's what I'm arguing in terms of the altcoin market, is that it tends to just get wrecked, not only in the bear market year, but also the pre-halving year, and maybe even the early stages of the halving year as well. Okay. Now, something else I wanted to mention is that if you look at the monthly Heikin-Ashi candles for Bitcoin, it actually has turned red. Okay, now at this point, there's not sufficient evidence to know, again, if it's going to stay red or not, but we have talked about the general idea of seeing this rally fade. And last month we saw, we saw this candle sort of have the upper part of the body of the candle lower than the prior month, just like we had in 2019. And then so far, this monthly candle has in fact turned red. So if it is going to follow the ghost of its 2019 self, then it could just mean that we just see Bitcoin sort of slowly fade for the next several months, right? Like that is a distinct outcome that is worthwhile to consider. Again, it is now a monthly Heikin-Ashi candle that is red. If you just look at normal candles, you can see that in fact we did get a monthly close last month down 7%, and then so far this month is already down about 7% as well. Sort of again going of the opinion, right, that we get half up and half down in the pre-halving year, and arguably we are in that downward process as we speak. Okay. One of the other things I wanted to mention as well is going back to this metric that we were following not too long ago, and that is the stablecoin supply ratio oscillator. Because this rally, the stablecoin supply ratio oscillator, went to the same level in 2019. Look at this. Look at the line across the page, right? Same level in 2019. And it did not mark the high for Bitcoin, right? It did not. You can see that we ended up getting one more move higher for Bitcoin, just like we did over here in 2023, right? We did get another move higher. But then after that final move higher, we faded for the next like 8-9 months, and the stablecoin supply ratio oscillator slowly came back down, and we're watching that happen right now. The stablecoin supply ratio oscillator is slowly coming back down to earth. Remember, again, we do have the sale going on for Into the Cryptoverse Premium, so make sure you check it out. Link is in the description below. So that's a metric that I think we have to remind ourselves of is, look, saw something similar in 2019. We still just faded the second half of the year. Okay. And there's plenty of different things that you can look at. And by the way, if we just look at where we are on this curve, you can see it's 48% below the fair value regression trend line. But anyways, Bitcoin as it stands, oftentimes in pre-halving years, what normally happens is people get excited, they call for new highs. Those highs do not materialize, and then both sides get wrecked. Now, how do both sides get wrecked, right? Well, you go into the year, everyone calls for a recession, we don't get it, the bears get wrecked. Then halfway through the year, everyone's calling for new highs, we don't get it, the bulls get wrecked. By the end of the year, everyone is sufficiently wrecked. And then, and only after we get back to likely QE, can we see those sustained pushes to new all-time highs. So I want to remind you that, my goal with this channel is not to just be a blind bull or a blind bear. I think there's always going to be some reasons to be bullish, and there's always going to be some reasons to be bearish. One reason potentially to think that Bitcoin could have renewed strength is that the dominance is still relatively low. suggesting that there could be sufficient liquidity in the altcoin market to lead to another move to buy Bitcoin, not necessarily to a new yearly high, but just maybe up enough to really break the dominance above 49%. The counterpoint again, though, is that in 2022 we saw the dominance rally, quite a bit, even when Bitcoin USD was going down. So I don't really think it's necessary to have that for the dominance to break above 49%, but I do think the dominance is on its path to ultimately breaking above 49%. Even of course in the short, even of course if in the short term the dominance has pulled back down to around that 47% level. But again, even in that case, we're still above the bull market support band, right? It's still above it and has plenty of wiggle room, right? Plenty of wiggle room on the dominance and still trying to stay above the 20-week SMA, which is not really the same thing. You can't really say the same thing about Bitcoin USD. You can't say the same thing about Total 2, which includes ETH, right? Total 2 is getting back below its bull market support band. Total 3 really never had a chance. Total is also below the bull market support band. At this point, it could just be a wick. We'll have to follow it up later on this week to see where it ultimately ends up. But again, in the same way that Total 3 is already below the 20-week, Bitcoin is now potentially testing below it. Total 2 already had a weekly close below it. What happens if the S&P gets a pullback and Bitcoin's already at the 20-week? The issue is that if it's already at the 20-week, then it has no wiggle room to go down with the S&P 500. And if the S&P gets that 5 or 10% mean reversion correction, then that could send Bitcoin well below the 20-week SMA and sort of cement in the idea of fading in the second half of the year. Anyways, if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Links in the description below. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.